Okay, let's unpack this. We've all been, okay, let's unpack this. We've all been, conditioned to believe that the path to financial stability is pretty straight. Get good grades, find a stable, high-paying job, and save diligently. But the material you shared, it just challenges that premise entirely. It argues that success isn't really about what you earn, it's about how you think about money. So today we have a fascinating stack of sources, and they all center on these foundational ideas of financial literacy. And it's all rooted in this concept of two powerful, contrasting mindsets about money. Our mission in this deep dive is to give you a shortcut to understanding why your perspective, your financial knowledge matters so much more than a fancy degree or a high income. And maybe more importantly, how your psychology pretty much dictates your financial outcomes. The core of this whole philosophy, it's built around the author's experiences growing up with two father figures. You've got the poor dad on one side, highly educated, secure in that traditional sense, and then the rich dad, who was a super astute businessman, but had, way less formal schooling.
What's so fascinating here is that the distinction wasn't intelligence. I mean, not at all. One guy had a PhD, the other was a high school dropout. The difference was purely their internal, let's call it their financial operating system. And we can look at this right through the lens of behavioral economics. One operated from a place of fear, and the other operated from a place of leverage.
Okay, so let's detail those two perspectives. The poor dad mindset. That's the blueprint most of us are taught, right? It's all about security and stability. It's defined by those phrases we all know. Go to school, get good grades, find a secure job, play it safe. And maybe the most powerful one of all, the idea that money is the reward for hard work.
And that just stands in stark contrast to the rich dad's philosophy, which was all about growth and ownership. I mean, his advice was it was drastically different. He'd say, learn how money works so you can make it work for you. He saw money as a tool to be mastered, not a master to be served. And the critical difference, the absolute game changer, was focusing on building assets that paid you even when you were asleep. This takes us, directly to behavioral science, that poor dad perspective. It's a classic scarcity mindset. When people feel limited, they make fear-based decisions. They're driven by the worry of losing what little they have, and that translates to, playing it safe. Conservative investing, prioritizing job security above everything else, and seeing all debt as just evil.
So that scarcity mindset can lead to self-limiting behavior, even if the person is, say, a doctor or a lawyer making a huge salary.
Precisely. Exactly. And conversely, people operating with a growth mindset, that's the rich dad's world, they focus on calculated risks, on continuous learning, on building long-term leverage. The sources, they assert it so plainly. The psychological frame you adopt, that becomes your financial destiny. It doesn't matter what your starting income is.
That distinction, labor versus leverage, that leads us to probably the single most famous insight from all this material. I'm talking about the line, the poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. I mean, that is just a seismic shift in how we define financial effort.
It is. It emphasizes that real wealth doesn't primarily grow from trading your time for dollars. That's just labor. It grows through this combination of knowledge, strategy, compounding, ownership, and discipline. You can be the hardest worker on the planet, pulling in $250,000 a year, but if you don't have the discipline to turn that income into assets, you're just tethered to the paycheck forever.
Which raises a really powerful question. If this knowledge is the key to, freedom, why is it so often hidden in plain sight? Why isn't financial literacy a core class in every single school?
And this is where the critique of institutional conditioning comes in. And this part is really interesting. The material argues that our educational systems, they came about largely during the industrial age, and they were designed to train compliant employees. They prioritize skills like obedience, memory, and, conformity.
That's a strong claim. It's suggesting schools aren't failing to teach this stuff. They're actively succeeding at teaching something else.
They're succeeding at training people to be excellent employees, yes, absolutely. But they do not teach the skills required for ownership. Things like emotional resilience with money, risk assessment, how to build businesses. So if you stay within that system, you naturally adopt the poor dad's operating system. It's the default. The conclusion is tough, but it's direct. If you want a life defined by ownership and autonomy, you have to deliberately go out and find the education that the system was never built to give you. You literally have to reprogram yourself.
Let's turn that reprogramming into action then. Let's get into the engine room of this whole philosophy. I'm talking about the simple, almost brutal truth of assets versus liabilities. It's all based on a cash flow rule that seems so simple, but well, people ignore it all the time.
The entire strategy just boils down to one thing everyone needs to burn into their brain. Assets put money into your pocket.
Yeah.
Liabilities take money out of your pocket. That's it.
Okay, let's get specific here with some examples from the sources, because this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Assets. They're things like investments that pay you dividends, right?
Right.
Or real estate that generates rental income. Businesses that run without you having to be there every day. Even intellectual property.
Exactly. Now, for the liabilities, these are the things that just drain your cash flow,
Yeah.
often, dressed up as status or necessity, expensive cars, high-interest credit card debt, luxury stuff. But the most important and, frankly, the most controversial liability the philosophy points to
Hmm.
is your own home, your primary residence.
Wait, okay, that's the point. That's where this material always sparks a huge debate. How can a paid-off home, no, I mean, the absolute symbol of American security, how can that be a liability?
Because the classification is purely about cash flow. It's not about perceived value or, that feeling of security. While your home might go up in value over time, that's an investment argument, sure, on a monthly basis, it takes money out of your pocket.
Hmm.
Property taxes, maintenance, insurance, maybe mortgage interest. It doesn't generate income. It's an expense generator.
I see the logic, the pure accounting logic. It demands a shift, a huge shift, from seeing your home as a security blanket to seeing it just as a cash flow machine. So the philosophy insists you have to buy assets first, and then let those assets pay for your lifestyle and your liabilities.
And if the rule is so simple, buy assets, avoid liabilities,
Yeah.
why do so many smart, high-income people fail at it? It's because they confuse status symbols with actual financial success. This is pure psychology at work, specifically our old friend, present bias.
Ah, right. The preference for feeling good right now.
Exactly that. Present bias is that powerful, very human urge to prioritize immediate pleasure. The feeling of driving that new luxury car today over your own future well-being and freedom. So the rich dad perspective, it's basically a psychological tool. It's designed to help you defeat that present bias. It forces you to choose between status today or ultimate freedom tomorrow.
That constant battle against the urge for instant status, that leads us to the psychology of risk, which is really the final major divider between these two financial worlds. The poor dad's view was, well, it was conservative, don't take risks, debt is dangerous, security is everything.
Whereas the rich dad saw risk as a necessary ingredient for growth. He'd say fear is normal, it's just a signal you need to work through it. And he saw debt not as something evil, but as a potential tool. A tool for leverage if you manage it correctly. He even warned that security without growth becomes a prison.
Wow, that idea. Security as a prison. That is deeply unsettling. It implies that by always seeking safety, you eventually just limit your own opportunities until you're actually trapped.
That's the mechanism at play. And research actually supports this. People who consistently avoid all risk, they often have slower career growth, lower long-term wealth, and ironically, they report higher emotional regret later in life.
Yeah.
You basically exchange potential loss for guaranteed stagnation.
So the goal isn't to become a gambler, it's to learn how to do your homework. It's about calculated risk.
Precisely. It's about calculated risk. The people who do this, they build not just money, but they build confidence, adaptability, opportunity. They know how to study a deal, how to mitigate the downsides, how to execute a plan. They're taking educated swings. The biggest obstacle isn't the risk itself, it's that paralyzing emotional block. The source material just sums up perfectly. Your fear of losing is stronger than your desire to win, and that's what holds you back.
This deep dive has made it so clear. This material, it's not just a guide to accounting, it's a manual for self-assessment. It forces you to look inward and ask some really profound questions like, are my financial decisions driven by fear I inherited from the system, or are they driven by a real purpose and a strategy?
And that introspection, that's what leads to the ultimate synthesis of the whole philosophy. The sources, they fundamentally shift the definition of rich. The real goal isn't some arbitrary number in a bank account. It's autonomy. And autonomy is defined as the freedom to make choices from a position of strength, from abundance, not from a position of survival or necessity. That ability to choose how you spend your time, who you work with, that is the ultimate financial asset.
So building on that idea of institutional conditioning and the power of assets, here's a provocative thought for you to chew on. If skills that significantly increase your earning power or give you leverage are considered assets, Then how much time are you investing each week in acquiring new skills that directly challenge the conformity taught by that old industrial age system? Skills like negotiating, risk analysis, or coding, versus just working more hours for the same old exchange of time for money. Is your focus on labor or is it on leveraging? That's the real choice that will dictate your financial future.